Hi, everybody. I'm Craig Schulz from Amtrak. I'm going to introduce my colleagues here in a second, and actually, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Tony Ryan, Jay Sankar, Sharon Tepper, and Kara Oldhouser. But before we get started in our conversation, I'm just going to sort of set the table, if you will, and give you a little bit of context for what we're going to be talking about. There we go. Okay. I will say it is an awesome time to be working at Amtrak. It is really, we are beginning a new era. We have begun a new era for passenger rail. Unprecedented support from the stakeholders, really up and down, from the federal, state, local levels, historic levels of investment through the IIJA, the infrastructure legislation, a really aggressive strategy for growth throughout the Amtrak network. With really exciting potential to connect communities that lack passenger rail service today, or maybe have passenger rail service, but somewhat insufficient passenger rail service. An improved onboard experience. If you haven't been on Amtrak since COVID, check it out. There's some fun new elements and things you may find on board. A growing and diverse workforce. I feel like every time I turn around, there's someone new at Amtrak. We're hiring like crazy. We have a lot of excitement going on and a strong return of demand. Really, this is really what's driving all of our excitement here, is the fact that our passengers are coming back to the railroad. And in many cases, actually, we're finding new passengers are trying Amtrak for the first time. So it is an exciting time. We also have a tremendous amount of work to do. As I'm sure you all well know, the Northeast Corridor has a significant number of assets and infrastructure elements that are beyond their useful life and badly in need of updating, if not expanding. A few of them are listed here: Susquehanna River Bridge, East River Tunnel, Connecticut River Bridge, the Gateway Program, which you'll hear more about in the following panel here in just a moment. And we'll talk about some of these in some detail here as we go along. And then a tremendous amount of investment and development going on in our stations, namely on the Northeast Corridor, but not just on the Northeast Corridor. We also have a big project going on in Chicago, but looking to leverage all of our significant real estate holdings in pretty key parts of the U.S. and downtown locations. Of course, we'll talk about Penn Station here. Sharon is very heavily involved in the Penn Station projects. But Philadelphia, Gray 30th Street Station. Baltimore, we have construction underway. And Chicago, I mentioned, in Washington Union Station, all in line for major upgrades. So we'll talk about those. And then Kara here, Kara Oldhouser, is our Director of Sustainability. And so we're going to talk about Amtrak's climate commitment. You know, it's something that we don't just sort of talk about at Amtrak. It is very much woven into the fabric of our culture. And so, you can see some of our sort of high-level commitments, getting to net zero by 2045, carbon-free electricity. And Kara's going to talk a little bit more about that as we get into our conversation. Just a kind of sampling of some of the upcoming projects that we have. This is just in the New York, New Jersey region here in the next couple of years. I won't read off all of these projects per se. Many of them you've probably heard of or are familiar with in some way, shape, or form. But the number at the bottom, I think, is really important to see. In FY23, we're looking to deploy $375 million worth of capital on these projects. By 24, that's going to nearly triple to $1.3 billion. And if I had the 25 and 26 numbers, they would probably be going on the same trajectory, right? I mean, we are looking to be doing a lot of work in the coming years. So I'm glad to see all of you here and interested in what we're talking about, because we're going to need to work together to deliver all of these things. And to that end, I will sort of leave this up actually as we're talking, because I'm guessing this is what you've all come for, how to get your hands on some of this work. There are a number of ways to connect with us. Of course, our procurement portal is the best way to keep tabs on projects and solicitations as they're coming out. But we very much value our supplier diversity, small business and DBE programs. So we'll be talking more about all that stuff. And I think that's our last slide. It is. Okay, so I'm going to leave that one up. Okay. Hello. It is. Okay. Now you hear me here. Okay, so that's sort of a little bit of a scene setter, but we have some very distinguished panelists here that I'm going to ask to introduce themselves, starting with you, Tony.
Thanks very much, Craig. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tony Ryan, Vice President of Program Development and Project Services at Amtrak. I am new to Amtrak, and that's a theme that you may hear. So we've just finished up our fiscal year. We've hired 3,700 new people at Amtrak over the course of the year, and that's a really exciting thing. Kind of dovetails with that, I should disclose I am a recovering lawyer, and I think that speaks a little bit to the background of what we're building. So in a previous life, I was a partner with a large DC-based firm. I represented transit agencies in large-scale infrastructure projects, transitioned to a very large EPC contractor and supporting a number of different delivery models, and now here at Amtrak. And I think that really speaks to what's really necessary for Amtrak going forward. So for the first time, Amtrak is not just doing the really important service operations for the nation's intercity train service, as Craig talked about, but we're also having to scale up and delivering these incredibly large and complex infrastructure projects at the same time, while continuing to support the growing need and address the state of good repair work. So I think that's maybe a good kind of dovetail in terms of what we've done here and how all of us are tied together. So earlier this year, Amtrak stood up a new department to be able to support this called the Capital Delivery Organization. And when you think about what's important for successful capital delivery, you kind of see where we're going to talk about how the work transitions here. But my group, the Program Development Project Services, is really teed up at the front end of the work to be able to package the various work that we have. So you think about how can we sequence the funding that's coming in with the track outages, with the workforce needs, all kind of in the wheelhouse up front to get that right, get the right delivery strategy. So for the first time, doing new innovative types of delivery models that we're doing delivery partner, we're doing CMAR contracts, even design build contracts are new for Amtrak. And there's a reason for that. It's not just because we brought 3,700 new people on. With the advent of the IIJA funding, we've got a better line of sight for how our funding will come in, and we can leverage those funds in a way that we didn't have the ability to do in the past. So it's a really exciting place from where I sit with our shop to be able to develop these projects, get them procured out into the market the right way, and then hand it over to Jay, who I'll introduce you in a second, who really, among other things in the infrastructure group, leads the execution of that work. But why am I here? Why are we here? For me, we cannot do this alone. So even though we've hired 3,700 people, we're hiring people from all different skill sets. So I am not a railroader by training, but that's part of what we're trying to do at Amtrak, is get different perspectives, different backgrounds, and be innovative in deploying our resources to execute this work. So it's a really exciting time. I think, if you will, kind of in the figuratively, we'll pass the baton now over to Jay to talk a little bit more on the infrastructure side.
Hello, everybody. It's great to see you. It's great to see so many familiar faces in this room. I am an engineer. I'm not a lawyer, so Tony and I sometimes agree and disagree, but that's okay. That's part of this new team we're building. But next year I'll have be 30 years in the business. My background has been in heavy civil, rail and transit, design and construction. I've been fortunate to work with many of you in this room, delivering some of these projects here in New York. So just really excited to be part of this team at Amtrak. Like Tony said, we're all new, not all new, but I'm new. I started in June, so I've been really just getting my feet wet, learning about all the things that Amtrak has done and all the good work that the team has done there with limited resources, limited funding, and trying to build up that team and that capability along with the people that have gotten us to this point to be able to execute on the opportunity that we have, like Tony said, with the IIJA funding. It is a really unprecedented opportunity that we have here. And when I say we, I mean all of us, right? Because this is an opportunity for us to reshape the way that we deliver infrastructure in this country, and to show our funding partners that we can do this together, right? And to the extent that we have opportunities that we have to deliver, we can't do that without partnering with industry as well, both consultants, contractors, finance, law firms, everyone that's involved from the design through the execution of the project. So for me, this is really personal, because it is an opportunity for us to share in and sort of show that this industry can actually deliver on these commitments that we're making. So My background, again, the last thing I did was work on the Penn Station Access Project, which is a partnership between Amtrak and the MTA, and there's some folks here that participated in that project as well. And it was really gratifying to see the groundbreaking last week and to see Tony Kosha there along with Jano Lieber and leadership in New York. And we need to reset those partnerships and those conversations so that we're doing these projects together. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go.
Hi, I'm Sharon Tepper, Director of Planning and Development for New York Penn Station. In my role and in our department, we coordinate the various redevelopment major projects in and around Penn Station, including Penn reconstruction, Penn expansion, and the larger Penn district planning, and also several interim improvement plans and addressing the immediate needs of the surrounding neighborhood.
Good morning, afternoon. I feel like we're right on the fringe of transitioning over. I'm Kara Oldhouser. I'm Amtrak's Director of Sustainability. I'm based in the Philadelphia office, but my position is a national one. I think it demands great creativity and thank you. And I feel like I'm kind of seasoned on this panel because I've been with the company for 5 whole years. So for many of you that have spent your career in transportation planning and supporting the work of Amtrak, we really look forward to continuing to work with you and bring your expertise to help us accomplish these really ambitious things that we're trying to do, like decarbonize a mainly diesel locomotive fleet, and decarbonize the rest of our operations, and also prepare for climate change in some very vulnerable areas. So should be interesting.
I'm really excited about the fact that Kara's on this panel, actually, because we don't, everybody doesn't always necessarily think about sustainability as it relates to infrastructure, but we're going to talk about how we very much do at Amtrak. It's very much a part of our thinking, our culture, and Kara's a very big part of that. So thank you for being here, as all of our panelists. I appreciate you all being here. Okay, so I'll start with the first question here for Tony. We're sort of organized. Tony kind of, the way our capital delivery program or our department is organized, we have an engineering services group headed by Ray Varel, who kind of, I've heard you describe it sort of like they are kind of the arms and legs, I think, of the projects, right? And they kind of conceive of and have the technical expertise around what needs to be done. Tony then, with his planning and planning services and delivery strategy group, basically then sort of takes those needs, packages them all up, puts out, it works with the procurement department, legal to get the agreements in place, hands them off to Jay, and the stations group. Sharon works with Jeannie Kwan and our station delivery group, and then the gateway program sort of lives out there in its own kind of big world of complicated stakeholders and delivery, and that's headed up by Marie Corrado. And of course, like I said, Kara and the sustainability group sort of permeate all of our work. Okay, but Tony, I want to start with you. You mentioned, and we've been talking a little bit about some of the alternative delivery methods and models that we've introduced here to Amtrak. One of the sort of, I think, most exciting ones that I've learned a lot about, and I've been with Amtrak actually 10 years, so I'm very excited to be the most sort of senior Amtrak person here. That's not usually the case. But I know that from my experience at Amtrak, and I've learned a lot about this over the past few months, it requires a lot of change, and there are a lot of new things that we're going to have to introduce at Amtrak. But if you could sort of talk about the significance of a delivery partner model, why it is sort of so exciting for us at Amtrak, and how we're going to go and deploy that would be great.
Great. Thanks, Craig. Absolutely. So this is one of the things that's really personally very exciting to me. So we're here talking with all of you, and it's an example to say we're not just giving lip service on this. When you think about a delivery partner, this is really us, putting money where our mouth is in terms of being able to really do our very best to leverage industry so that Amtrak can be successful in delivering these projects and being good stewards of our funds. So how do we do that? So I'll speak just from Amtrak's perspective about what really is a delivery partner and why we're going on this path. So if you think about how a delivery partner in Amtrak's view is going to be set up, we made one announcement for a delivery partner that will be launching next month. Really excited about that on the B&P tunnel replacement program. But if I speak more generally to what is a delivery partner, why it's important, I think a lot about what are the drivers for a delivery partner and how we can get the very best from industry so that, again, we're successful. I think, and not to get too in the weeds, kind of think of 3 different ways a delivery partner is different from other ways about how a delivery partner is compensated, right? So in a delivery partner model, Amtrak's view, there's 3 different ways. So the first is you get a delivery partner gets paid for their actual costs, so salaries, overhead, open book basis. That is the first prong. Second prong of a delivery partner is a fixed fee that covers a negotiated, agreed profit between the owner and the delivery partner. And the most innovative part is the part where we're really excited to get feedback from all of you. And we did run an RFI earlier this summer, is really this idea of pain share, gain share. So if you as our delivery partner are helping us get our projects done faster and costing less money ahead of, under budget, then it's appropriate to share in those savings with the delivery partner that made that happen. So it's really a win-win situation for us to be able to really put traction in all rowing the same way. And of course, there is the downside as well in terms of there's upside and there's downside as well. But you think about where this has been deployed internationally. And I know lots of folks here have been part of those different projects. There's really an appetite within Amtrak to leverage this industry internationally to be able to be successful with it. So when I think about delivery partner, I think that's an example. And I would say our doors are open. We put out our first CMAR that Jay's team will be executing on the B&P tunnel, and there hopefully will be more of these innovative types of models coming forward. We're doing PPP on the 30th Street station, and we're really open to innovative ideas. So we're not limited to just delivery partner, but certainly welcome feedback from industry on even other types of contracting models that maybe have not typically been used in the past.
Yeah, that's. I think one of the themes that you'll hear throughout the panel here is that we are really looking to innovate at Amtrak, right? We are really focused on bringing innovative solutions to what have been pretty complicated, difficult questions and problems. So this is really one good example of how how we are looking to introduce some of these innovative concepts and ideas throughout the company. And then Jay, your department, you oversee sort of the execution of these projects and and these models. So if you could sort of pick up that baton a little bit and sort of talk about when it gets to your level, when it get once the sort of the agreements are in place and the strategy is set, what does that mean really sort of on the ground, from boots on the ground perspective in terms of executing the project? And then from an Amtrak point of view, these are new concepts and new ideas. So if you could talk a little bit about sort of the changes that are going on internally and how we're adapting to kind of meet this new challenge.
Yeah, some of this will be hypothetical because, like Tony said, we haven't done this before, right? So I think what's really exciting for me joining this team is the recognition that doing the same thing as we've done needs to change, right? Because we can't possibly deliver on the commitments we're going to have to make without thinking outside the box. And there was a meeting that Tony and I were in with some of our leadership, and someone on that call said, not having done something is not a reason not to do it, right? So like Tony said, the CMAR for B&P Tunnel is the first one we're doing. If I can step a little bit back into your world, Tony, a little bit on the procurement side, I think the recognition that we have, in particular, let's use the CMAR as the example, is to bring the builder in earlier, right? I think most of us, especially in the market in New York, are very used to the traditional design, bid, build, delivery. It's the adversarial contract that gets put in place, and you're sort of managing, the owner gets put in a place where they're managing scope, they're managing change. They oftentimes can adopt an innovative idea because it's not within the budget, or there's no appetite for change. So the idea is to bring the CMAR design, the contractor in early. But the key that Tony and I have talked about is there's going to be pressure for us to deliver on these projects, right? We need to get them out the door, shovels in the ground, pictures for the politicians, right? That's going to be a big part of this. But we have to allow the CMAR to run its course, right? To have the benefit for the CMAR, we have to allow the time to allow the contractor to actually bring their ideas to the table, have the time for us to vet the ideas and then and execute on the changes that we want to make in the design to leverage the capabilities and the innovations and the thinking of the CMAR contractor. So for me, that upfront work is so important because it makes my job easier, right? If we can get the scope right, we can get the design right, we can allocate the risk properly, because that's a big part of what we're going to do at the beginning when we engage in the CMAR process, is to look at risk allocation and who's best to mitigate that risk and handle that risk. So from that perspective, the upfront stuff is going to be super important to our ability to execute on that. So that's where I come in, right? So my team basically takes the baton from Tony, basically through procurement. Once procurement's done, then my team is managing the project from that point on. So depending on if it's CMAR, if it's design build, if it's traditional design build, the structure of the team that would be executing and managing that job would look different, right? We know that a design build, you're light on the inspection, but you're heavy on the program management side, project management side. With CMAR, it's a bit of a hybrid where you still own the design as the owner, so you probably have a CM on the team. And delivery partner is the opposite end of the spectrum, right? That's where you're kind of relinquishing control of the project, for the most part, to a consultant, a consultant firm, consortium of firms. Where I need to sort of work with Tony and Ray and my team is to know what role Amtrak plays in that execution. Because I think most of you know who've worked with Amtrak, working on the railroad requires Amtrak to be part of that team, right? So it's calibrating and planning ahead on how are we going to manage track outages, how are we going to manage our force account staff, and that's going to be something that my team, the execution team, will continue to focus on. So there's really, again, I'm talking hypothetically, so if you look at the B&P tunnel, it's likely going to be a team of consultants supporting us on the delivery partner side, working with the contractor and managing the construction in the field. But ultimately, the scope, schedule, and budget will be managed by them, but we have to share in that as well. So we'll have a project controls team set up, we'll have a force account team set up. And what Tony, I don't think you touched upon yet, is Tony's team actually is going to own the management of the track outages and the resources. So there's going to be constant interplay, even once Tony's team hands it off to my team and to Jeannie's team and Sharon's team, that there's going to be this constant interplay of how we're managing all the work. Because you can imagine track outage is the currency of Amtrak and force account resources is the currency of Amtrak. We have to leverage the outages to do more than just one project, because we have to be able to maximize the efficiency of our limited resources of force account staff. So that's a conversation that we're having right now.
That's right. If I could just, jump on that. I think that's really important. It ties to a couple things. So within my group, about getting that right, when you think about what our current opportunities and challenges are for the existing work, and you look at the number on the previous slide about how much it's going to scale up, it's really important for us, and we're putting in place a long-term plan along with our partners in the Northeast Corridor to be able to map out those track outages, not just in the short term, but for when these other larger scale projects are going to be hitting in 25, 26, and 27. And I think that dovetails a little bit with Jay's earlier point about the CMAR and the engagement early. There is a bit of a mantra, I'm sure others use it, of going slow to go fast, which is here. And so I think a lot about it, in the first instance, as Jay is talking about, making sure getting the full benefit of a CMAR contract. But I think the other piece of it is an opportunity that we've got here with this team that hasn't existed before at Amtrak in terms of getting out of the silos and really working together. So at the front end of a project development, I'm now having the opportunity to engage with Kara, for example, to make sure that when we're putting not just the specs, but also, what's the, internally, like, what are we taking to the board? What's the project charter? What's important for us? And so it's not just done as like, well, this is what's needed for this construction. It's a much broader perspective. And so that really is the vision that Amtrak is taking as we're launching these projects internally and externally.
All right, so I'm going to skip over you, Sharon. I'm sorry. You'll understand, though, because there was a nice segue right into Kara. So if you could talk a little bit more about sustainability, like Tony was saying, and how we're kind of front-end loading a lot of the thinking around sustainability to make sure it's incorporated into the projects. And then, Sharon, I'm coming your way next.
Okay. As you saw on the slide that Craig popped up earlier, net zero by 2045. Everyone has these really big goals. We don't have all of the answers. Not everyone in this room does. So I will be very humble and admit that straight up. But we have 3 different levers that we're focused on in the near term, some that are going to be more immediate in giving us better results for reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, while it also gives us more time to be able to work on the harder things like our locomotive fleet. So with our view from the strategy and planning department, which we were moved into in the beginning of this calendar year, historically, sustainability has existed in the environmental group, and it's a different conversation, it's different players. And I think that that was such a mark from our executive leadership to see the transition that had to take place for them to be able to meet the commitments that they were making and stating publicly, but then also to have us interface with Tony and Jay and others that are leading mega projects and huge investments and are responsible for meeting these deadlines. It's a really exciting time to be able to be in the room and talking about how you can start engaging your vendors early on so that they understand what we're trying to accomplish, not just from a delivery standpoint, but by something that is generations from now, both on a mitigation as well as protecting the assets and the investments that we're making from being further exposed if we're just building to regular standards as they currently are. Is that enough for you, Craig?
That was great.
Okay.
No, that was fantastic. Yes. I didn't know I was the judge and jury there, but no, I think that was a good answer. Okay, so Sharon, as we were talking about track outages and partnerships, I couldn't help but think about Penn Station. Of course, you are steeped in the Penn Station project, but it is a good example, I think, of some of the partnerships that we have going on sort of throughout the network. So if you could talk a little bit about our priorities for Penn Station and then how we're approaching that project and then sort of our global stations investment portfolio, it'd be great.
Sure. Thanks, Craig. So at Penn Station, our priorities really are to ensure that the complex meets the needs of everyone who uses it each and every day. And that includes, of course, Amtrak's customers, the commuters through Long Island Railroad, New Jersey Transit, and soon Metro North, but also the local community members who also use the station for many reasons. And so the main projects that we're working on at Penn Station right now, we're partnering with MTA New Jersey Transit on Penn Reconstruction, which Peter Matusevich would speak about next on the next panel, which is a re-envisioning or redevelopment of the Penn Station footprint on the Penn block only, that will allow everyone to be able to better find Penn Station when they're in the area. The most commonly asked question on the corner of 31st and 7th is, where is Penn Station? Even though it's right in front of you. But also will just really simplify wayfinding, really unify the station, and just make it nice, clear, high ceiling environment for everyone to use and find their train. And then the other major project, which is actually part of our Gateway program, is the Penn Expansion Project, which is the expansion of tracks and platforms at Penn Station to accommodate the anticipated growth in ridership coming mostly from New Jersey. And then the other piece that we're working here in planning and Amtrak is also just weaving all of this together. Obviously, we opened Moynihan Train Hall January of 2021. So just ensuring that it's one whole unified planned complex. We're working with people from the local community and ESD, the state of New York, on a larger public realm task force to just ensure everything that we need around a rich transit-oriented development is there. But in addition to all these larger projects, we're actually improving the station every day. We've launched Art at Amtrak this past year at Amtrak. We have a new installation coming in January, and we're going to roll that out at our other major stations and throughout the national network. And Amtrak has invested over $300 million in the station and the infrastructure surrounding it in the last 5-10 years or so. So, we will continue to make all of these improvements that you can see on the concourses, but also behind the walls too, that keep the trains running.
And I will say, I know it's not the most popular position to take, but if you haven't been in Penn Station lately, it has improved dramatically, I will say. I was just walking through there today, actually. It's a nice winter scene up in the rotunda. it does feel different, and that is largely due to Sharon and her team's work. The art at Amtrak really brightens up the concourses. We've made some nice improvements down on the platform, which sort of subtle improvements to the lighting and the platform markings and things. So, we care very much about Penn Station, the existing Penn Station. It is a critically important asset to Amtrak, and does not go by the wayside just because we're over at Moynihan Train Hall. Still very much on our radar. Kara, I want to go back to you actually and talk a little bit about sort of climate change as it relates to sustainability, and how Amtrak is thinking about our assets and protecting our assets from climate change, which I know is something that your group has been working on quite a bit.
Yes. I know this conversation has been focused because it is Infra Day East, so it makes sense that we're focused on the Northeast Corridor and the East Coast. We have plenty of vulnerable assets that are in this area for our network. We also have challenges across the rest of the country, and that's what we are about to explore. But what I'm most excited about, that I've worked on closely for the last 2 years with our consultants is a Northeast Corridor vulnerability assessment that looked at heat, wind, storm surge, and sea level rise, and heavy precipitation events. So those cloud bursts that they were talking about earlier this morning totally piqued my interest to be able to explore that. We conducted that along with climate roundtables internally. We wanted to have different disciplines at the table, people that work out along the maintenance of way, people that are leading the design specifications and the documents for review, people that are in procurement and marketing and emergency response, because they're all seeing climate change show up in their jobs differently. And we, at that time, were a team of one. So now that we've grown, we're able to collect that information much more rapidly because we can spread out and have our fingers in other conversations and meeting invites. But it's important for us right now to take what we heard from the climate roundtables, and we converted that into a climate resilience strategic plan. Both that and the vulnerability assessment report are available on our FOIA page because we haven't quite carved out space for it in a different web page yet, but you can find it publicly. And within that, we have 9 priority actions that we will focus on for the next 3 years. So that way we have intentional work that we're doing. And then beyond that, we will look at what's evolving and what makes sense for us to focus on next. And then leading off of that, within those 9 priority actions, an RFP that is currently out on the street that I'm also really excited about that's coming up is a review of our design standards. So some of the operators that have spoken have a captive fleet, or they have a captive state that they're working in, or they're within a very small region. For us, we have projects that have to account for Army Corps of Engineers, the Coast Guard, the state level regulations, local building codes, and it's a very layered process. And so what my intention is to be able to explore where there are climate gaps, for us to be able to address those with something that is more specific and is a guide for our practitioners at Amtrak to be able to take that and address the vulnerabilities that we're currently building off of and improve before Tony goes and spends all that money.
Well, in order for Tony to spend all that money, we have to have the workforce in place to be able to deliver these projects, right? So Tony, I know you have workforce planning is under your portfolio. I think this is not just an Amtrak issue. I think this is an industry issue. But if you could talk a little bit about what we are doing at Amtrak to kind of make sure that we have the right people in the right places to go and deliver these projects, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is it's not just the flip of a switch that we're going to be able to have the resources that we need to do this. And so Amtrak has been very focused across the waterfront, if you will, in terms of developing our resources internally. So working across agreement and management employees through a number of internship programs and recruitments. I would say folks like me who necessarily don't have that background. But I think one of the key ways that we are going to be successful in getting the right people to do the work is again to leverage folks externally to be part of the Amtrak team in executing this work. When I think about how we're going to be successful, like talk about spending money, it's really important to our partners, to our stakeholders, partners that are here, partners that are funding us, legislators. In order for us to be successful now and in the future, it's really important for us to get this right. And when I think about IIJA, like this is being talked about as like this is the first one, and we'd love to be going back for more, but we need to get it right. And so us just hiring people and developing, I mean, think about some of the expertise, especially on the track, takes years to go through training to be able to get the right number of resources that are there. Leveraging industry through models like Delivery Partner is really a shared interest for Amtrak, our communities, our partners, and industry to build that capability and expertise.
Thank you. We have just a couple of minutes left, and I'm going to ask Jay, since I think you're the newest member of the Amtrak family up here. I think by 2 months. It counts, yeah. So could you sort of talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about sort of, this is really, I kind of want to emphasize, I mean, this is not sort of, your old Amtrak anymore, right? I mean, we are really focused on being responsive and, improving our processes internally and being good partners, to industry, to our commuter agency partners, to our customers, of course, who in many cases are our commuter agency partners. But Jay, I wanted to see if you could maybe kind of put a little context around that, as a new member of the Amtrak family here, what should people know about what it's like kind of on the other side here?
You want the that's a loaded
the curated version.
No, I mean, well, honestly, when people ask me that question and they say, well, what do you like about working there? It's the people. I've really enjoyed getting to know the family here at Amtrak. I mean, there are people are passionate about running this operation. What I've also really been impressed by, and this may be shocking to some of you, is the diversity that exists now at Amtrak in terms of leadership. Being part of the team that Laura Mason stood up, she values that tremendously. What I mean by diversity, I don't just mean race, color, gender. It's really about diversity of thought as well. It's about bringing people in that aren't traditionally railroaders to bring that perspective into the way that we need to morph from not just an operator of the intercity service, but also builder, right? To renew our assets and to expand our assets to more places that need intercity passenger service and need Amtrak to serve those communities. So to me, it's really the Amtrak is built upon the people that have been here, but I love the new people, Tony and others, that I've gotten to know, and to see that blend of how Amtrak is operated and how it needs to operate, and then how this new group of Amtrak employees are bringing a different perspective, and it's all kind of coming together. And I think you're seeing the results, I'm hoping now, with these types of project delivery methods, for example, that we're using, but it expands to every part of our workforce. It really does, and that's been the best part of the experience so far.
Yeah, no, and I can vouch for that. I mean, it is nice to know. I was not I knew nothing about the railroad when I started at Amtrak. And it's nice to see some other folks actually kind of coming in and not knowing a whole lot about the railroad either. So, but they've learned quickly, I will say. I think we're pretty much out of time here. I want to thank the panel here, everybody, for coming, and thank you all for listening. We'll see you out there.